Welcome to the Okiki podcast, where we make inspirational people known. Brought to you by your host, Fian O'Brien. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. You are listening to episode 76. And I also would like to introduce today the Okiki Video Bootcamp. Yes, I will be launching a course, which I will have a wait list in the show notes. And I will be launching some group coaching as well. I know there has been a lot of requests lately of people wanting to learn how can they create content for their own brands. And so I'm looking forward to bringing you along on the journey with that. If that's something that you've wanted to gain skills and techniques on, this will be for you. You'll learn systems on how to create content effectively and efficiently and have more time for yourself in the process while reaching your clients. Again, you can find the information for the Okiki Video Bootcamp in the show notes below. On today's episode, I get to interview a very special guest. She is Venessa, who is a baker, a caker, and dessert creator behind Foodiefarmbabe. She is an oncologist, pharmacist by day, and cake queen by night. And one of the cool things is that we are both from the same city. And as a local, I noticed other local creatives, and I could not help but notice the amount of effort that she put into her cake designs, especially on her Instagram channel. With that, she actually got selected to go to Foodnetwork Canada's season 1 of the Great Chocolate Showdown, all the way from Saskatoon. So that's great. And she's also won 3 best cupcake competitions right here in our city 3 years in a row. So I'm very excited to share her story with you all as an audience today. I have to admit, this is a really fun interview, and you'll hear it as we go back and forth on the journey of being a creative in a smaller city. By the way, if you have been loving these episodes, be sure to leave me a rating and be sure to subscribe. And let me know in the comments, how are these episodes impacting you? Are you as inspired as I am when I listen to these guests? I would really love to know. And on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Okiki podcast. And today I have a special guest, Venessa Liang, who happens to be an oncology pharmacist, a baker, cake maker, and also has gotten into making chocolates of all things. So much so that she's actually on Food Network Canada's season 1 of the Great Chocolate Showdown, and she hails from Saskatoon. So I'm really excited to hear about her journey and share that with you all. And thank you, Venessa, for being willing to be on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so I wanted you to share with the audience, what was your educational and career journey? And especially since you're in a unique situation where you still do your career, but you're also growing a very cool business. So love to hear that insight as to what brought you here.
Well, my first question actually is a question back to you. Are you wondering about my career as in my real career, how I got there, or my baking side wildness and how I got there? Or maybe a combination of both?
Definitely a combination of both, because I think we live in a day and age now where, people have their career, they have businesses, they have side hustles, some people going it full time. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective as someone who's not on one fence or another.
For sure. I started out at the University of Saskatchewan, College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. That's my main career. I went to school to become a pharmacist, and now I work full-time as an oncology pharmacist. So I work with cancer patients as well as specializing with kids with cancer as well. So that's my main job, my main career. And then on the side, I want to stay on the side, but really I spend so much time doing this side thing that it feels full time, even though it's not. But baking has always been a huge part of my life. And ever since I was little, ever since I can remember, baking has always been a part of my life. whenever people had birthdays, I was always the first person to bake something or create something to celebrate. And honestly, it's always been a part here that I don't even know, I can't even explain to you kind of how it started. Creating fancier cakes has definitely been a newer part of how this became a side thing, I guess. Probably in my third year of pharmacy school, I think I really started getting into it. And it kind of just took off from there. After I graduated, became a pharmacist, I just continued to create more and more. And I dove deeper and deeper into creating cake art. And now, after being on the show on Food Network, that's kind of how I started into chocolate bar making. And that's been my latest and greatest art form, essentially.
For sure. I think there's so many pieces to pick up from that. So, especially your area of pharmacy, just to start with, I think that's really fascinating because it's not just, and I shouldn't say not just because pharmacists are very helpful in society, but it's kind of beyond just filling prescriptions. Like you're dealing, like you said, with cancer patients and kids. I'm sure there's a layer to that of having some similarities of being interested in like nutrition and ingredients, and then the fun side of it too. So it's kind of cool to see that overlap. And was the cake making kind of an outlet as well as you were dealing with some of these more serious challenges in your actual career?
So the cakes that I create, I definitely on purpose think of designs and try to create designs that are very, very difficult and end up being quite stressful in their own way. But it's a kind of stress and difficulty that makes me really focus on it. So the complexity of a design or whatever it is that I'm making, that I'm creating, I love that it's so difficult because it really requires me to focus on it so much that it takes my day away. So my usual stresses of my workday, my career, even though I do love my job, it allows me to kind of escape in that way that brings me to another sort of difficulty. I can't focus on both at the same time because they're both, so complex and can be so overwhelming. So it's nice to have a different kind of overwhelming. I know a lot of people see what I do and they're like, wow, that's just like so much work and so stressful. And it is, but it is in a different way. And it allows me to kind of, like I said, escape from my stresses of my normal career in my day to day.
For sure. Yeah, because that's very important work. And yeah, it's just something that kind of resonated hearing your story. And then also in going into the cake making, when did you start noticing that people were noticing what you were doing? I know you said around third year pharmacy. So was it
That's kind of when I started. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was kind of the initiatives in like showing people like this is what I do? And where were the areas where you were starting to really get feedback that you're like, okay, I can really grow this?
I don't really know, to be honest. I don't know when that kind of happened. I mean, I would say I really started to take cake making pretty seriously after I really graduated and got a job as a pharmacist. And mostly because when you want to do really complicated art and cake and chocolate, people forget how much time and how much, it costs for ingredients and really specialty supplies. I mean, people always ask me, like, where do you buy this? Where do you buy these types of things for cakes and chocolate? And the answer is never here, unfortunately. It's so hard to source ingredients here. It's almost always out of province, super expensive shipping, everything like that. So being a pharmacist and having an actual job to pay for my art was a big part of when I really got the ball rolling, because at the very beginning I was like, oh my God, I can't buy this one jar of luster dust because it's so expensive. But then, having an actual job to be able to pay for that kind of changed things up a bit. So it allowed me to have access to different resources and different types of ingredients and bring really, luxury and fancy ingredients into Saskatoon and use those to create what I'm making at the time.
Cool. And I think that also could speak to people listening to this podcast, right, who have entrepreneurship ideas. And I think a lot of times, especially before the pandemic, it was kind of like the all in was kind of what was advertised to people. But sometimes it actually does make sense to bootstrap and like invest in yourself and keep that 9 to 5 and really put in the work, like you're saying, because some of it just really is high cost to get that quality that you want.
Yes, exactly. And even if the baked goods, the cakes, the chocolate and everything is expensive in a sense, without having that background of knowing how much time and ingredients goes into it, like that number is kind of meaningless. You're like, oh my God, like $50 for a chocolate bar. That's insane. It's like, well, that took me 4 days to make. So like, how much do you want to be paid for 4 days of work? Right. And yeah, it's really hard to understand. And that so many people are like, when are you quitting your day job? I mean, it definitely helps that I love my day job, but even if it was in the opposite direction where that cliche of, quit your 9 to 5, go do your dream kind of thing. In that case, that's still a huge decision that people forget to think about. Okay, if this becomes my actual day job, it becomes sometimes your 24-hour a day job, and you don't realize that, right? When you start to count the hours that you're putting in and the ingredients and the time and the effort, you're like, holy crap, I'm paying myself like $5 an hour, right? Like that's not something people consider when they think of giving up their day job, right? And for me, it's not just the financials, it's that I do really truly enjoy my day job. So I opt for both of them.
For sure. And that's a very good situation to be in. So, as you got your career going, you were able to invest more into the cakes and go more into the luxury cakes, especially. And I have to say, maybe I'm not versed in this space in Saskatoon. I don't see so much luxury cakes like to that extent. So, again, do you feel like for your cake side of the business, do you feel like it started to really take off when people are seeing designs that they hadn't really seen before? Is that kind of when you started getting more attention, like social media wise as well?
Social media wise, I think so. I mean, I don't want to say the market here, but like the population in Saskatoon and kind of what our genre is, I guess, in cake land, it is definitely very different from the bigger cities, right? We just don't have that community or group of people as big of a community that is, invested in things like this, right? To most people, a cake is a cake and they don't really care how fancy it is. And even if it's not even fancy, it can be really fancy to most people already. And I do understand that. And I think a big part of it was just sharing what I was creating and sharing it truly, right? Showing all the processes is really important to me, allowing people to see what it takes to get from the beginning to the end, seeing that ugly before getting to the really beautiful. And I think allowing people to see that part of the process helps them appreciate kind of how we get to that endpoint, right? And like I said, what I'm creating is definitely not for everyone. If not, it's for a very small subset group niche of people that really appreciate my art. And I'm completely cool with that. I love that. And I only want to be creating for people that are going to really appreciate what I'm making for them at the same time. So it's mostly just word of mouth, social media. I don't feel like I really do anything special to kind of increase that exposure or anything, but when people know, they know, and they spread the word on their own and they kind of let everyone know about that in their own way.
For sure. And in light of that, how do you stay inspired in that space, considering you're kind of in this niche? And like you said, maybe not, we don't have the same access necessarily to the ingredients like the bigger city centers or even, other people
Mm-hmm.
to kind of glean off of. So what keeps you motivated and inspired and yeah, basically keeping up your craft while you're here?
Yeah. So, I mean, the power of social media, I have to tell you, you basically have access to the entire world, everybody, what they're doing, what they're creating. There's definitely not a shortage of inspiration. I love to follow cake artists from everywhere around the world. There's so many talented people out there. It's just unbelievable. And then kind of bringing it home outside of social media, I actually lean to my husband for inspiration because he thinks very different than I do. We're both very different people. He's a more very logical, I would say not less creative, but different creative, where he will be like, I'm not creative. I can't decide on colors. I can't do this. Whereas, like I said, we're very, very opposite in that regard. But when I'm asking him for inspiration for a design, he will come up with something that I would never ever think of. For example, he would want me to create something that's symmetrical and cantilevers off in a certain way that would actually be very beautiful as a cake design, but definitely something I would never think of. So there's, like I said, two sides to it. At home here, my inspiration is to look at non-cake inspiration. So my husband is non-cake inspiration. Pottery, right? Glass making. A lot of the other arts can be brought over and incorporated into cake art. And I find that that's probably my favorite way of creating new designs is bringing, like I said, pottery techniques, ceramics, painting on a cake. It's the same thing. It's just a different canvas, right? So It's just, there's so many possibilities to pull inspiration from other than just cake. So just because there isn't, lots of inspiration for cake, I can always pull that from a lot of different art forms.
That's really cool to hear. And I agree with you. I think there's even some cake influencers I follow, and I'm not even someone who's trying to be in that space, but simply because I'm like, I respect the work. But yeah, this one lady, she like used to be a architect, and then she like transferred it into cake making.
Yes.
And I just remember, I think I've been following her for a few years, but I was just like, whoa, I love people who do things differently. And this is kind of leading into my next question, because you were part of a reality show. I was watching a totally different one. I think the guy's name is Amri Guidon. I hope I'm getting it right, but he does crazy things with chocolate.
Like unreal crazy.
And I
like on another level.
came across this show and I had to watch it because I have such respect for people who create art and have talent. And I just could not believe what he was creating with chocolate. And so when I read your article, I was like, oh, she was also on a chocolate show. And
not the same. Not compare me to that show. It is not the same.
She's on her way. We'll see it soon. But yeah, like what was the process of cakes to chocolate and the journey of you even ending up on this television show on Food Network?
So again, powers of social media. I never did chocolate. Chocolate was never a part of my life. This was not a part of my art creative plan ever. I was kind of going hard into cakes as I always had, and like continuing to like create new designs. And I think the only chocolate thing I really made was my chocolate cake. And that was like a signature thing for me. I mean, it was a big deal to me because I used this main recipe to enter a bunch of competitions locally in Saskatoon. So that was the only chocolate thing I ever did. And a casting director messaged me on Instagram and was like, you should go on this show. And I was like, I don't do chocolate. And they were like, oh no, it's just loosely based on chocolate. Don't worry, it'll be fine. It was not fine. It was not loosely based on chocolate. It was completely chocolate. So that's basically how I got into chocolate. I just jumped right in, not knowing what I was getting into. The whole experience was just like a whirlwind. I mean, TV is crazy. It's glamorous, but exhausting. And I learned so much when I was there, and it just kind of opened up this door for me into the chocolate world. And pretty much after that whole experience, I was hooked. I wanted to know more and more and more. And basically since then, I've been doing tons of extra education, trying to learn more about how to perfect my chocolate craft. Compared from chocolates to cakes, it's completely night and day, process wise and difficulty wise. Chocolate is so hard. It's so hard. For sure, a lifelong journey, I would say. There's so much to learn. It's so difficult and so hard to perfect. So I'm still like, I feel like I'm still very much at the beginning, but that's how I got into it.
That's so fascinating. So they saw your work, clearly your hard work on Instagram, and thought maybe this person would be great for, for this experience. And it sounds like you had like this baptism by fire. You're just like,
yeah, literally just throw her in and like see what happens. Maybe she'll become a chocolatier. I don't know.
Wow. So that just sounds like a intense boot camp you went through learning how to make chocolate.
That's
and like
exactly
you said,
what it was.
I can't even imagine. And it's on television, and you got
on
the cameras
national
and
TV.
the judges.
Yes, exactly.
So first of all, yeah, like you said, that totally changed your process. All of a sudden you had this whole toolkit basically at the end of the day, and the processes are very different. I guess my question to you is like, how has that affected, I guess, the vision of what you do moving forward and what you want to offer? And do you find any aspects of either of the crafts influence each other in the work you now do today?
So the way I'm separating it currently is by season. So chocolate is very temperamental. That is a pun, and only 5 people will get it. That's okay. It's not impossible, but very difficult for me to work with chocolate in the summer months. So at any point where it's too hot and chocolate can melt and I can't exactly control the temperature and the humidity as much, I can't really work with it. And I mean, I could, but I'm choosing not to, because I still do love cakes and I still want to be able to do them as much as I have been. And I've since learned over the last 2 years of doing chocolate that I cannot do both of them at the same time for risk of my sanity completely going. So I've decided to divide them completely. I'm doing chocolate in the colder months. So I start basically just at the beginning / end of fall going into Christmas. And then I stop just before spring, as spring / summer is coming. And then that kind of spring summer season is my main cake season. And I don't do any chocolate at that time. Crossover wise, I mean, flavor components and flavor combinations, I think is the only place where it crosses over. Since the technique of both the cake and the chocolate is so different, it's mostly just the flavor profiles that I'm really playing with and doing combinations with from both sides.
And how has the experience of the show impacted you, like, I guess, confidence and work ethic wise? Because I'm sure it was, I mean, you were already working very hard, but I'm sure it was very grueling compared to your own schedule of creation.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I would just say that reality TV is not reality. To make something truly incredible takes time. And I definitely put that into my own, philosophy and what I create for my community here. I take my time and I really refine it down to an art. And I guess the one thing I would take from the show is that it doesn't take 90 minutes to make what I make. And that's not something I want to bring into what I'm creating, because it's not real. And it doesn't portray an adequate, picture of the art itself. It kind of dumbs it down, right? It's like, oh, you can make this super incredible, amazing thing in 90 minutes. It's like, well, you can't, but we're going to make it seem like you can, right? And I don't want to portray that picture. I want people to see it how it is. I want them to see the process true to how it works. The fact that it does take 3 to 4 days of process to make, a chocolate bar that I'm creating. So the good with the bad, right?
I'm sure also, having had this experience, there's a fair bit of exposure that comes with it. I guess I have 2 questions. Where can the audience actually find this show to, especially if the Saskatoon audience listening wants to support another local? Yeah. 2, have people reached out to you in more so because you've been, showcased on this national show in this way?
That's a good question. I don't actually know where you can watch. I know you can watch it on Amazon Prime if you have Stack TV. So it technically aired like 2 years ago now, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm pretty sure the finale aired like as the world shut down, and it was really sad because I was having like we had like screening days. We went out to a restaurant and watched with everyone, and then it was like boom, world shut down, and kind of everything was just like no longer exciting, which kind of sucks. But now it's just airing. It just started airing in the US. So that's brand new. It's taken 2 years to get there. Airing there for the first time on the CW, beside like Riverdale and The Vampire Diaries, which I think is hilarious. Like, I'm not sure what the audience is going to be that is watching my show now compared to when it aired, because it aired on Food Network Canada. So people that watch Food Network watch a chocolate show. You're like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, great. And now it's, like I said, airing on the CW, which is like this teenage drama channel.
That's hilarious.
I feel like the teenagers are gonna either like tear us apart or they'll love it. Who knows? I mean, I don't really know. I feel like I'm so past that generation that I don't know how they would judge us at this point.
Definitely.
In Canada, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's available on Amazon Prime if you have Stack TV, which is like an additional subscription. I know that sucks, but they have told us that they're still working on a Netflix deal. So maybe someday we'll be on Netflix, and that would be totally the coolest. They do play reruns all the time on Food Network and on Cooking Channel. Yes, Food Channel. I randomly have people message me all the freaking time being like, hey, it's you. And I'm like, hey, that's not me anymore. That's not me anymore.
You're like, I'm already over that stage.
Yeah, I know. People are like, that is so impressive. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It really wasn't. Oh my God. Have you seen me now? Oh my God.
For sure.
I don't even know if I answered your second question. It's gone now.
Yeah, kind of, because I was trying to figure out if, and especially knowing this was aired 2 years ago, has that increased business for you? Has that increased people interested in what you have to offer?
I don't really think so that much. I would say mostly my exposure is from Instagram. And I don't have a huge audience on Instagram. It's just like Instagram plus word of mouth. People just talk. And I guess I don't really know, because I don't advertise anywhere else. I don't do anything to kind of try to increase that exposure, but opportunities kind of just come here and there. I had mentioned I did compete in the cupcake competition at with the Princess Shop. So I did that 3 years in a row, and that I think did get quite a bit of exposure as well. And then I've just kind of done like podcasts, radio interviews, CTV, random interviews just kind of pop up here and there, and I do some features, and that's kind of how it spreads, I guess. But the show, I feel like the show is forgotten. People are like, whatever, I don't know.
Until someone shows you an old episode.
Yeah, until they're like, look, I see you. Great. Oh my God, my hair is purple. It's not me anymore.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was pretty excited. I'm always excited to see locals that are featured in something like that, especially creatives from our city. It's always nice and refreshing to see that. So that's definitely why I reached out. And I guess in light of what you're doing today, where do you see this in like 2 or 3 or 5 years even, especially considering that you actually love your 9 to 5?
I know. And I think my husband asked me this like a couple of weeks ago. He's like, do you have like a 5-year plan? Like, what do you want to do? And I was just like, oh my God, I've never stopped to think about this before. I've just been like rolling with the punches and like, this is the next thing I'm doing. This is the next thing I'm doing, without really like any sort of view or a bigger picture. And to be honest, that is my answer. I have not really thought about a bigger picture. Combining my day job and this, I guess, the first thought I think is that I would want to work less. So I don't want anyone to get any kind of wrong ideas that I want to quit my day job to do this. It's just that I'm working full time, averaging about, it's like 37, 40 hours a week. And then I come home, and the extra time that I have, I use to do, chocolate or cake or whatnot. So the only time I have to do this is essentially nighttime and weekend time. So any of my normal life things, like still trying to go wall climbing 2 to 3 times a week. I play on a volleyball team, once a week for 3 hours. And then we have, Monday night dinners with my family. So it's like, there's only a couple hours in my day left that aren't doing any of those things. And I think that it's not really sustainable for me long term. I've been young and great, and I still feel young and energetic, but I know that this is not something that is healthy to do for a long time. Even though feel like I'm really crushing it right now, I think I need to think a little bit more. If I were to have kids, how my life would look like, and if I were to continue at the pace I am now, what that would mean for my mental and my physical health. So I think my goal is, between my two, I guess, careers and passions, is to work a little bit less in terms of hours, and just so I can balance what I'm doing in my passion a little bit more. Because I can stay up till 3 a.m. and eat ramen noodles, finish the cake, and then have a nap for 2 hours and then like crush the next day. But like, it's probably not healthy, Like, I know that. I should like retrospectively look in there and be like, yeah, maybe you should do that for the rest of your life. I don't know.
That's definitely the challenge. Like when you're multi-passionate and you're young and you're like doing everything. And
Yeah.
I can definitely relate somewhat to what you're saying. I mean, for those of you listening, we're doing this at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night.
Exactly.
Because I'm very passionate about podcasting on top of the other things. So we sound very similar. And it's just a matter of like you said, like reining it in and figuring out, okay, what do I want to focus on? Where do I want to balance and all of that? So I feel like that's like the lesson of life. So definitely can relate to that.
Exactly.
Sure. And the final question is, what do you value the most about the position you're in today with your career and these businesses that you get to lead?
Well, with my main career, of course, it's so rewarding. It is truly very difficult. It's regular hours, but long hours, in the sense that it takes a lot of mental focus. A lot of people hear cancer and they're like, oh my God, that's so sad and terrible, and it must be so hard to work. And it's like, that is like just a tiny cherry on top of the ice cream, like that part is difficult. And the whole job itself is very mentally straining and mentally challenging, which is a reason why I love it, right? I want to be able to exercise my brain in that regard, but it's just difficult in so many different factors, right? In cake land, I guess it's like I said, I bring that difficulty on myself. But it's such a great way to be able to connect with my community. So I've met so many different creatives in Saskatoon that I, never thought I would be meeting with and partnering with and collaborating with. And that is just so cool. Like definitely a people person. I love meeting new people and being able to connect with other, even just local businesses in Saskatoon is so great because I love food. I love the food scene, the drink scene, and it kind of just all comes together because we all really appreciate great food, beautiful food. And that's kind of what brings it all together for me, is having that feeling of being really rewarded by my day job, and then just feeling so connected to my community with my passion that I'm doing.
Yeah, very cool answer. And it's interesting to see how both have a type of purpose. Yeah, in your life for sure. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Venessa, for this interview and sharing your story. And to be honest, it was super fun for me too. Because I just felt like there are so many things where like, yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah, she's crazy. Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
So I do thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the audience today and your journey, and definitely looking forward to seeing more of your work online. And where can the audience find you?
Where can they find me? Well, I only have time for one social media. That's what I've decided. That is my boundary. I'm like one social media on Instagram, and that's Foodiefarmbabe. And that's farm with a PH because I'm a pharmacist, not a farmer. Foodiefarmbabe pharmacist. And then I do have a website, www.foodiefarmbabe.com. That's essentially kind of like a little bit of a portfolio, highlights what I do, what I've created. And that's been kind of my main place for my chocolate bar launches, essentially. So yeah, social media, Instagram, and my website. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thanks so much again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was great.